Yeah, thanks for having me. I don't need to say the little bit about what I do then. But yeah, I wanted to I'm just going to take you through a few projects that I've been working on. And I wanted to start with where I'm from. So as Rebecca just mentioned, I'm from Elephant and Castle in southeast London. And I spent my whole childhood there, and then moved back there in 2009 as someone that could draw, and kind of was interested in having an art career, I guess, but was just figuring things out. And so moving back there, I began furiously documenting the Elephant and Castle. Basically, it was kind of earmarked for demolition. So it's kind of a shopping centre surrounded by estates. There's a big roundabout, and there's kind of this constant talk of regeneration going on. And back in 2009, regeneration was quite a new thing. And I was just learning what it meant. So just kind of documenting the area and the shopping centre that hadn't changed since I was a child. There's a lot of market stall holders, small kind of shop traders. It's very ethnically diverse. There's a large Latin American community that live and work there, Bangladeshi community, and it's really a kind of, for me, just felt like the whole city in a really small space. But now it's kind of, this is really what the landscape looks like. So kind of at that time, regeneration was about supposed to be kind of improving an area for the people that lived there, and actually swiftly everyone started realising that the area was really becoming something for the sorts of people that you see on the hoardings. I kind of started thinking, well, just these drawings weren't kind of going anywhere, and what was the point in documenting? And I was becoming more interested in chatting with people about what regeneration meant. And I do want to just read a little quote, actually, so that I can be a little bit clearer on maybe where I stand as an artist in these kind of community settings as well. So this is a quote from Linton Kwesi Johnson, and it's an opinion that I agree with. I don't believe art changes anything. Art reflects changes within the wider society. Changes come out of people's material struggles in life. What community artists can do within their work is to assist those struggles and to participate in the development of the consciousness that fuels them. So we kind of created a space basically at Elephant and Castle to kind of have these kind of conversations. And I guess the work became about evidencing and making visible the diversity of cultures, skills, networks, and resourcefulness present in the area. And so we kind of managed to negotiate this empty shop unit that we used as a residency space for local community organisations that didn't have a space to kind of meet and organise. So in this picture you see the Latin American Women's Rights Services and the Latin American Workers Association that used it as a kind of info shop and a place to meet and make work in. And then we kind of started moving into skill exchanges. This was back in, so basically was working in Elephant for about 10 years on different projects. And this was, the skill exchanges was really about kind of, right, how can we kind of all come together in a space? How do we unite? There are lots of different community groups here that don't necessarily connect. And actually connection in a place that's being earmarked for demolition is really important, because we were learning that in places of development, it's really easy to get a planning application through if a developer just says, well, there's not really a sense of community here, and if there is, it's invisible. So it became about making it really visible. So we as kind of residents, traders as well, other artists and activists sort of became very visible by sort of hosting these skill exchanges, events, parties on the big kind of shop floor. And the beauty of Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre is that it's not like Westfield or these kind of posh shopping centres that you get. It's really, you can just set up and kind of everything's quite ad hoc, and it's quite beautiful actually. So yeah, that kind of moved into sort of, yeah, I guess kind of representation and the sort of capacity of communities to self-organise, basically. So how do we tool up? How do we learn jargon around development and, you know, what does this mean for us, where we're living, where we're working? And kind of we started working with kind of architects, members of the council, and, you know, also tried to have these conversations with developers around kind of, you know, who the big players are, this new housing, what does affordable mean? What's luxury living? Can I still live here? And whose responsibility is it anyway? Because everyone's constantly passing the buck. So these kind of playful games were actually at their core about quite serious sort of politics and concerns. And I guess it became, rather than the sort of celebratory kind of atmosphere that it once was, and that was really important and poignant, it became more about resisting, and it got quite serious. So we worked for 3 years on a short film, which you can see online, called Unearthing Elephant, where we, so I collaborate with Eva Sajewicz, who's a Slovenian artist and was also resident, still is, brought up her kids in Elephant and been living there for 20 years. And we've been working together on this film, and took us 3 years to do 15 minutes because it was really difficult to get right, you know, these politics and this story, but we just knew that this localized narrative was universal and it had to be kind of heard by people outside of the shopping centre and outside of the borough and online, basically. And that became part of a kind of the political campaign that was kind of objecting to the planning application to demolish the shopping centre. So much around Elephant has kind of been demolished since, but the shopping centre still stands, and yeah, so that's kind of continuing. So then kind of always running parallel to the stuff at Elephant was kind of then, you know, this idea of, right, there's these conversations that we're having at Elephant, but this issue is universal. And I was really inspired by some of the women that were displaced. So they were kind of moved out of the estate next door to Elephant called the Haygate. I don't know if you heard about it, but it was quite well reported. But and they, although they sort of moved out to the kind of peripheries of London, they would still come back each week to go to the bingo hall that was at the shopping centre. And I guess I sort of, you know, was kind of started having these conversations with people outside of London, like, you know, how do we come together and why is it not always easy? And so up in Coventry, at my granddad's working men's club, where most of my family are members, this is the Hen Lane, and started kind of having conversations with some of the members there around how did they still come together and what were the issues, you know, sort of in this particular area where my dad was brought up, you know, how this social club was built, you know, right in the middle of 3 mines, and those were all shut. And so kind of just, you know, having these sort of informal conversations, and through that just kind of met these really great guys who introduced me to this project that they started in 1983 called Forward Together. And it was really about celebrating how kind of working men's clubs, in particular Hen Lane, but all of them, weren't just about a pint of lager and a packet of crisps. They were about organising and coming together. And also sort of kind of about skill exchanges as well. So they had like aerobics instructors come in, and this was sort of next to the bar. They were doing like aerobics lessons and various different things. But sadly in 1984 there was the miners' strike, and so kind of this whole really exciting, quite radical program had to get abandoned, obviously, because, you know, the focus point was kind of looking after the families that were getting through that whole year of striking. At the same time, I met this woman called Doreen. Doing the work that I do that's like community context, I started kind of getting commissions from arts organisations and galleries, and I can talk more about that later because I have lots of beefs around community engagement and all of these different things. But Doreen, I just met, we became good friends, and she was a Hackney bar lady for 30 years. Don't take any shit, aren't afraid to hold the local council to account for not clearing up stuff, but also make sure you have a really good time in their presence. So that kind of twinned with being, you know, at my granddad's club, just started thinking about how to mobilise these conversations, and created Mavis Davies with Doreen. So Mavis Davies is based on Doreen. What she looks like, sounds like, smells like was kind of largely up to Doreen and based on her. And then kind of basically started up the Oasis Social Club. So it was really a sort of idea of, right, how do we take these core principles that are really important, you know, this kind of committee, local people sort of representing their area, self-organising, also having a really good time, but exchanging at the same time. But at the same time, it be progressive and welcoming of everybody, not just kind of, because it is like a white working class kind of tradition that's very male dominated as well. So yeah, embarked on this process of going on tour to Preston and Stoke-on-Trent and Hull. So this was Denise Braithwaite was created locally, and again, looked like, smelt like, sounded like, was all up to locals. I learnt the accent and everything, believe it or not. And, you know, just this sort of process of kind of creating these characters was quite interesting, because then people owned them, and sort of Barb Forshaw is based on Brenda Proctor, who is a North Staffordshire miner's wife who I work with in Stoke-on-Trent. And that's the club, so it was kind of really literally transparent, and it was kind of designed to be sort of welcoming and yeah, very alternative kind of style to the working men's club, but everything kind of based on the Hen Lane Club. So at the same time as having kind of these very traditional sort of forms of entertainment like the bingo and the karaoke, it was also about kind of sitting down and having a discussion about local issues, but also the stuff that people felt like needed to be represented better and celebrated more. Also lots of discussion around lack of representation and often misrepresentation, and being an area that, you know, is just kind of sidelined or ignored. So there's always voice, it's just that people felt like there's never a platform for their opinions, or they weren't being listened to. So this was Portland Street in Stoke-on-Trent. The kind of context there is that it was on the Pathfinder scheme that I think John Prescott introduced years ago. I think that's right. And so because it was kind of, this is an area that was earmarked for the Pathfinder scheme, which meant that it was going to be demolished, but lots of people refused to move. Then also the council kind of lost some sort of partnership with the developer. So half the houses were left empty, so they introduced the pound housing scheme. And then as a result of that, because there was no sort of infrastructure around this kind of regeneration scheme that was the pound houses, it was quite a kind of tense, separated sort of environment where people felt like they just weren't integrating, or they, you know, didn't know their neighbour. The community hall was shut, the pub had been derelict for 9 years, and the corner shop was closed down as well. So very, very temporarily, this space was really, it felt really electric. And so yeah, basically that was back in 2015, and as part of the Oasis Social Club, so I sort of missed this point, as well as the landlady, we create a committee of local representatives. So they might be people representing young, old, migrant groups, whatever it might be, and also kind of council members are on that committee, so they can kind of listen to these conversations. And then we come up with a manifesto, and that manifesto in each place, Stoke, Hull and Preston, was delivered to the local council. Actually, we were at Preston railway station on platform 3, and they were quite amazing because they let us read out the manifesto on the tannoy, which was amazing. But anyway, so yeah, basically, so I've got a couple of minutes left, I think. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, on a year after sort of delivering the manifesto to Stoke City Council, the council called me up and said, would I be interested in working with Anna Francis, who is a Pound House owner, local resident, and also an artist, working on a project that came to the same conclusion as the Oasis Social Club. Would we be up for sort of taking over a pub temporarily? That turned into the Portland Inn project. And that's just become, yeah, I moved up to Stoke. We set up a community interest company with local residents, and we managed to negotiate the pub building. So we own the pub building for 25 years for free, and we've kind of recently finalised the architectural plans for that space. And, you know, it's the two of us kind of that have been managing most of it are artists. The kind of the core program that we deliver is arts creative, but it's also about upskilling, it's about learning, and it's really about kind of, you know, knowing your neighbour and exchanging, and also, you know, agency and all those things, but really about feeling like you can represent yourself. And I think maybe we'll get into this later, but just, you know, sometimes kind of community-based projects and work like this, I think, can be used and kind of misused by commissioners in order to kind of take the pressure off local councils and local services. And actually, we're really adamant that this is about putting the pressure on. And in addition to that, you know, that everyone in that area is entitled to really good quality art and work happening on their street. So this was built by, we did a co-build with Baxendale, who had just weeks before it built a pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And we ran an architecture school rather than consulting people around what they wanted in the building. We just ran an architecture school. And yeah, so there's sort of lots of different activity going on. But yeah, I think that's where I end. That's, sorry.